Alright, so I flipped it over. I put it on some 4x4s to protect the head surface, even though it's probably going to be resurfaced. I'm going to take the oil pan off so we can get the pistons and crank out. Like I said, though, I don't think the crank's going to come out because of this stupid-ass bolt, but hey, we'll see if the machine shop can get that off for us. So, looks like they're 10mm bolts. It's quite a bit of them, but oh, they're not very tight. I'll go ahead and use the impact gun. And then there are two really big bolts over here, 16mm. Looks like 16 of the 10mm ones and 2 of the 16mm ones. It should come off now. Okay, this side looks like it's still being held on. Oh, there are 2 behind the flex plate. 2 10mm bolts behind the flex plate. I'm going to take the flex plate back off. In case you guys want to watch me take the flex plate off. There are shims, little spacers. There's supposed to be one on this side, but we took it off and put the flywheel back on. See, it's on right here. I'm just going to leave it there so it keeps its spacing. These are the 2 10mm bolts right here. So how many were there? 16? I think there's 18 of these then. I didn't count. Kind of sludgy looking. It's okay, we'll clean it up. Okay, so we have a splash guard. It looks like it's being held on by a 10mm bolt here. I guess I'll take the oil pump off. We do need to take that chain off. It goes up to the cams. Last time I didn't take the lower end of the engine off, so I left the timing chain. And I used a chain tensioner at the top so the chain would stay in timing even though I took the cams out. Actually, it's just between these 2 gears. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, oil pump is held on by that 1 bolt that we took off for the splash guard, and then 2 more 10mm bolts. I don't see any marking on here. There's a tensioner in here. If I can take that off. Looks like if I had this gear off right here, it'd come off a lot easier, but there's not enough slack. Well, I'm going to take this gear off. It looks like it's a big Allen bolt. Actually, it's Torx. Removing the gear for the oil pump now. It's a T40. Okay, so I got it with a pair of vice grips. I put the breaker bar on here and put vice grips on it and turned it. So I broke the bolt loose. Don't listen to me about the size because I'm not 100% sure if the size is right. I think it is. I felt confident that it was the right size. Perhaps it was already stripped out. Okay. Now if you look, it is an Allen, not a Torx. I believe. Anyway, it's stripped out. Can't really tell what it is now. So, anyway, got that off. Release the tension on the chain. Slide the pulley off. The gear. Now I'm going to take the oil pump off. This has to come off with the crank. I can't get that out. So. Oh, and I did mark on this gear. I put a little scratch mark. I put a little scratch mark on the chain and on this gear. If you look, here's the scratch. So to line up the chain next time. And I'm not going to be able to mark the lower gear because it's in the engine and I can't get the crank out. Okay. The Pistons, they're the reverse Torx. I believe they're E-bits. I have some. Let me go grab them. Okay, I'm confident this time that it is an E10. So if you look at the piston, you can't really see it, but there's notches on the driver's side. If you look at this one, you can see the little notch right here for the driver's side. Alright, so I got the one piston out, like I said, so I'm going to spin the crank over. Gotta hold this chain. Okay, so 2 and 3 are pointed up. These bolts feel like they're breaking, like they're snapping, but I haven't had any break, I haven't had it slip, but they do feel like they're about to snap. Okay. So we just need to make sure that we can put the cap, piston rod, connecting rod cap on in the right orientation. And we are punching a number in the side of the pistons because they don't seem to be numbered. And these are stretch bolts, like similar to head bolts. If you take them out, you got to replace them. They're one-time use. So I'm not going to take them out unless the bearing is still on here. I'm just going to set this here in the same direction. Just for my notes, this little nub here was on that side. There's a nub. Okay, so I'm going to take a piece of wood. Oh good, it was off camera, you can't see my piece of wood. Take my piece of wood and push the piston out with your hand underneath to catch it. Make sure you keep your bearing in the proper orientation, especially if you're not replacing them. Damn it. piston down, and I guess you can see what I'm going to do. Take the hammer, put it in the center of the bearing, and give it a good little shove while catching it with your other hand. There we go. Put your bearing cap back on. And then thread the bolts on so you don't lose the bolts, and your bearings stay in the proper orientation. Thread them down all the way to finger tight. Then what I'm doing, taking a rag, wiping the oil off. Taking a little screwdriver and numbering it. This one's number 3. Then I'm placing it in a box. Press it down. Oh, bearing cap. Actually, I do see some wear on the inside here. I'm going to be right back. According to my dad, the scoring on the between the bearing and the cap should be okay. I was thinking it might have been slipping. Spun bearing is no joke. Same deal with this one. Push it through. I'm going to put the hammer right on the edge of right in the center of the bearing and push it out. Okay. I'm going to pour the oil out of it. Put your cap back on. Mark this one, number 4. Set it in the box. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good to go. So the block is taken apart as much as we can without taking the crank out. There are some bolts here and on the front, but I'm not going to take them out, waste a gasket if it doesn't need to be resurfaced. The only reason we're going to take the crank out if we have to is if it needs to be resurfaced. So let's take the head apart. I'm going to take the cams out, and then I'm going to have to take the lifters out too. Cam sensor's loose. These are loose. So these caps are numbered as well. So for the intake side, they're numbered. Let's see where. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one doesn't have a 3 on it. This one has a 4 and a 5. And then these ones are numbered for the exhaust ones too. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that actually counts from the back of the engine. 1 is at the back, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is at the back, the front. By the way, the numbers are facing the intake side, so if you're facing the intake side, the number will be right side up. If you're facing the exhaust side, the number is going to be upside down. Doing the valves on these is a bitch. We did the valves the last time, and there's just not enough space to get the keepers back on. You can get them off because you can just use a magnet and pick them up, but getting them back on is a bitch. Tips for that would be get a good spring compressor where you still have a lot of finger room, and put grease on the keepers, and then use a magnetic screwdriver and try to get it to stick to the grease on the valve, and then slide it up and hope they don't slip off. It'll take a while. It's very frustrating. I'm trying to remember which side was easier. I think the exhaust side was harder because it had 3 valves. Or I think the intake side was harder because it had 3 valves. Okay, let's take this, well, let me go get my chain tensioner. Alright, so this little doodad keeps the chain in timing. I don't remember exactly how it goes on. So there's threads into the head, and it will push down the tensioner on the chain. Okay, I don't think I want any tighter than that. So the chain is loose now. I'm going to take this off. Looks like Torx, bigger Torx. Oh, I guess I had it on my ratchet the whole time. Timing tensioner.
So when you took these off, it pushed this one side up.
Okay.
So now it's uneven. So what you need to do is we need to put the caps back on this side and bring it back down.
Is that good?
Yeah. Now it comes up.
So there's still tension on the chain, so it's staying in timing. Just try not to mess with it too much. So I'm taking the lifters out, keeping them in order because some of them are spaced differently. So I'm putting them in the proper orientation here. This one is going to go to the next one, not the middle one. Alright, you get the idea. Taking the exhaust manifold off, they're 12mm nuts with washers.